What if the truth you never expected came not from a politician, a priest, or a prophet, but from a pop star? And what if it was revealed live, in front of millions, at the exact moment the world was mourning the death of a spiritual giant? When Justin Bieber walked onto the late-night stage just days after Pope Francis passed away, no one expected what was coming. The studio was buzzing with a quiet anticipation. This was supposed to be a typical interview. Maybe a few jokes, a sweet story about his wife, an update on a new album. Light, easy, forgettable. But from the moment he stepped into the spotlight, something was off. He wore a simple black suit, no tie. His hair was unstyled, longer than usual. His expression was courteous, but his eyes were distant, focused. Not on the host, not on the cameras, but on something resting silently on the table between them. A small golden rosary, placed gently on a deep blue velvet cloth, like a relic in a museum. It hadn't been there in the earlier promo shots. No one mentioned it, no one explained it, and yet, the moment Justin saw it, the room changed. The host tried to lighten the mood. Rough week, huh? The Pope's gone, and you still look immortal. Holy water, maybe? The audience chuckled. Justin didn't. He just looked down at the rosary, and then he touched it, lightly, almost reverently. His fingers trembled, but not from fear. It was like touching a wound that had just begun to scar over. The laughter died. The smiles faded. The cameras kept rolling. And then he spoke. "He told me something that night in Rome," Justin said, his voice low, almost like he was remembering a dream he wasn't ready to wake from. The host blinked. "Who did?" "Pope Francis." The room froze. The crew stopped moving. Even the studio lights seemed to hum quieter. And that's when everything shifted, from celebrity gossip to global confession, from scripted smiles to a truth that hadn't seen daylight. Until now, a truth entrusted not to a cardinal, not to a bishop, but to a pop icon whose life had already been shaped by silence, struggle, and second chances. Tonight, Justin wasn't here to sing. He wasn't here to promote. He was here to reveal something the world was never supposed to hear, and he had brought proof. What happens next may change everything you thought you knew about faith, power, and the shadows behind the light. But before we go deeper, what's the one thing you love most about Justin Bieber? Let us know in the comments below, because after tonight, you may never see him the same way again. The silence that followed Justin's words wasn't awkward. It was holy. Even the host, a man trained to fill every second with charm and chatter, sat speechless. Justin's fingers lingered over the rosary, his eyes distant but focused. Then, he leaned back slightly, voice steady but subdued. "Years ago," he said, "I received an invitation. One that didn't feel real." He paused, letting the words settle. "I was in Florence, filming a small project, a personal one, nothing commercial, just me, a small team, and a borrowed camera. It was meant to be a break from everything, fame, fans, the noise." He smiled faintly, like he was seeing the cobbled streets of Florence again. "One night, in the hotel, someone knocked on my door. I was alone. No security, no assistance. Just me." A hush rippled through the studio. He didn't say his name. He didn't say a word. He handed me an envelope and left. The host leaned forward slightly. "What kind of envelope?" Justin looked at him. "Handwritten, sealed with the insignia of the Vatican, red wax, gold thread. It looked ancient, like something out of a museum." "And what did it say?" Justin closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the exact words. It said, "I would like to walk with you in silence among the olive trees." Signed, Francis. The studio exhaled, softly, audibly. No dates, no explanation, no protocol. "Thought it was a prank," Justin continued. "Some elaborate art project. but something in my gut told me it wasn't. A beat. "So, you went?" the host asked, voice hushed. Justin nodded. "Yeah, of course I did. I didn't know what he wanted. Maybe to talk about faith. Maybe he needed help, celebrity help for a cause. But it wasn't like that. It wasn't like anything I'd expected." He shifted in his seat, his hands still calm, still gentle on the table. I was picked up in a plain black car. No plates. Driven through alleyways, not tourist roads. We entered the Vatican through a side gate I didn't even know existed. His voice lowered, drawing the audience closer. A senior official, older, maybe in his 70s, was waiting for me. He didn't introduce himself either, just nodded and walked. I followed him through stone corridors that seemed older than time itself. Then we stopped. Justin paused, eyes narrowing as he brought the memory into focus. There was a garden, small, enclosed. There were olive trees, just like the letter said. The moon was high, and under one of the trees, he was waiting. "Pope Francis," the host whispered. Justin nodded. He looked thin, tired, but his eyes were more alive than anyone I've ever met. He swallowed. He didn't greet me, didn't stand. He just looked at me and said, "You came." The host said nothing. No one in the studio did. "He talked first," Justin said. No small talk, no questions. Just this stream of thought, like he'd been waiting to say it for a long time. Justin took a breath, then continued. He told me he'd seen a video of me visiting a children's hospital, anonymously. No press, no selfies. Just me sitting with a little girl named Lucia. He looked up, as if searching for her face in the audience. I remembered her. She gave me a rubber bracelet that said, "Faith wins." I still wear it sometimes. Justin's voice caught for a moment, but he recovered quickly. He said that moment, that silence, spoke louder than any sermon he'd ever heard. And then he told me something I never expected. He leaned in. He said, "God has been silent with me for years." The air seemed to disappear from the studio. Justin's voice dropped to a near whisper. He said the weight of the chair of Peter had become too much, that the world saw a shepherd, but he felt like a ghost in a palace of noise. He said he prayed, but the heavens felt mute. A long pause, and then he looked at me, really looked at me, and he said, "Faith survives silence, but one day I fear it will begin to imitate it." The words hung like smoke. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. I just listened. And that's when he gave me the envelope. Justin's hand slowly reached toward his jacket. He didn't pull it out, yet. He just gestured. It was sealed. Red wax. Same insignia. He looked at me and said, "If I don't see you again, this secret must live." The host's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. I carried that envelope with me through every tour, every album, every heartbreak, every hotel room. I never opened it. "Why not?" the host asked. "Because I wasn't ready," Justin replied. "Because I was scared of what was inside. And because maybe I hoped it wouldn't come to this." He looked around the studio, then directly into the camera. But now, he's gone. And something's changed. The audience held its collective breath, and tonight, for the first time, I think I'm ready to break the silence. The studio had gone from Showtime sparkle to something like sacred space. The cameras rolled, but no one cared. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was revelation. Justin's fingers moved to the inside pocket of his blazer, slow and deliberate. He pulled out an envelope. It was old, not yellowed from sunlight, but from time. Its edges slightly worn, the paper thick, almost like parchment. The red wax seal was still intact, stamped with the unmistakable papal crest. He held it gently, like it might crumble if handled too harshly. I've kept this for years, he said, voice steady. Never opened it, not even once. It's been with me on planes, tour buses, hotel safes. I locked it in drawers. Then I unlocked it again. I almost opened it dozens of times. He looked at the host. But I always stopped. Something held me back. Maybe fear, maybe faith. I don't know. The host leaned in. Why open it now? Justin didn't answer right away. He turned the envelope over in his hands, then looked up. Past the host, past the audience, straight into the camera. Because he's gone now. And because maybe this was never meant to be buried with him. He gently placed the envelope on the table, beside the golden rosary. His fingers brushed both. The night he gave it to me, Justin said, he told me, don't read it until the silence becomes louder than the noise. I didn't know what that meant back then, but now, with everything happening, with everything shifting, I think I understand. He reached for the wax seal. The studio tensed. Even the sound of air conditioning seemed to vanish. With a soft but deliberate motion, Justin broke the seal. The sound, barely a whisper, cut through the room like thunder. He unfolded the letter. One crease at a time. His hands didn't shake. Not from nerves, from reverence. And then he began to read. To the man of silence who listens more than he speaks and sees more than he shows. Justin paused, his voice already trembling. This world does not need more saints in gold. It needs men who will carry light through the shadows cast by those who were supposed to protect it. The room felt colder. He looked up. This wasn't a blessing, he said softly. It was a burden, a passing of something heavy. He continued reading. I write this with a heart torn between duty and despair. For years, I fought behind marble walls. I wore the crown of the fisherman, while swimming in a sea of secrets. Justin stopped again, swallowed hard. There are forces inside this church I could never cleanse. They wear crosses on their chests, but move like wolves in the dark. A visible shudder passed through the audience. Justin lowered the letter slightly. He tried, he said. He tried to fix it from the inside, but he couldn't. So, he sent the truth out. The host tried to say something, but stopped himself. Justin raised the letter again. And now, if my voice is silenced, I ask you, an outsider, untouched by politics, to carry this truth. Not to destroy, but to preserve. His voice dropped to a whisper, a beat. Justin laid the page down. There was more, he said. Another sheet. He pulled a second folded page from inside the envelope. This one was thinner, more fragile. He opened it carefully, and then he hesitated. This part, he said, I've never read out loud, not to anyone, not even to myself in a mirror. He looked at the paper. Then he read, The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void. A low gasp rippled through the studio. Justin continued, I believe the collapse of faith will not come through heresy, but through imitation, through someone who appears pure, but brings nothingness. He looked up, his voice hollow now. He thought the danger wasn't in rebellion, but in resemblance. The host finally spoke, but quietly. You think this is happening now? Justin didn't answer. He stared at the paper as if the ink might move. I didn't understand it back then, he said. But after reading this, everything started to feel different. My own silence started to feel less like safety, more like delay. He folded the pages carefully, placed them back in the envelope, and pressed it down with his palm. And then, the letters started coming. The host blinked. Letters? Justin nodded. After Pope Francis died, I started getting these notes. No return address, no signature, just warnings. 7 of them. Over 4 years. Different cities. Different languages. He reached into the folder beside him and pulled out a handful of thin envelopes. They all said the same thing, he said. In different words. He opened one, read aloud. Do not open the envelope. There are forces watching. Silence protects more than you imagine. He looked up. I ignored the first one. Thought it was just a conspiracy nut. But then came the second. And the third. All different handwriting. Different postmarks. Did you try to trace them? The host asked. Yeah, Justin said. Private investigators. Digital forensics. Nothing. No fingerprints. No CCTV. Whoever sent them, they were careful. The host was visibly pale now. Justin placed the warning letters beside the papal envelope and the rosary. 3 relics of something deeper than anyone could grasp. He looked at the audience. I kept the silence because I thought it was safer. But maybe it wasn't meant to protect me. Maybe it was meant to protect something else. He took a breath. And tonight, I'm breaking it. Because maybe the truth doesn't belong in silence anymore. Justin sat back in his chair, the weight of the envelope still heavy in his palm, as if the words inside were trying to burn their way out. The host, who had started the evening with rehearsed jokes and polished charisma, was now pale, unsure, eyes darting between Justin and the floor, searching for something familiar in a moment that had become anything but. The studio lights flickered once, softly before settling. No one moved. I wasn't supposed to be the one to carry this, Justin said. I'm not a priest. I'm not a theologian. I'm not even a particularly holy man. But he chose me. He tapped the envelope twice with his finger, a steady, rhythmic sound that echoed slightly in the silence. He said it had to be someone outside, someone not caught in the web, someone who had touched people, not through power but through presence. He reached for the letter again, his voice firmer now. I didn't open it until a few weeks ago. I waited until after he passed. And when I did, I saw things I wish I hadn't. The host finally found his voice, though it was smaller than before. What kind of things? Justin looked at him, but didn't speak to him. He looked through him, his eyes fixed on something far deeper. There are people in the church who wear robes by day and darkness by night, not metaphorically, literally. People who hide behind the Vatican's walls and symbols to do things that would rot your soul just hearing about them. The host shifted in his seat, uncomfortable now, glancing toward the side of the stage, hoping for a cue to cut to commercial. None came. He knew, Justin continued. He tried to stop it. He tried to clean it out from the inside. But he was too late. So he gave it to me. He placed the letter flat on the table and slid it slightly forward, as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. And there's more. Justin pulled a second sheet from the envelope, one that had been tucked behind the letter. This one was written, in the same handwriting, but the ink was different. It shimmered faintly under the studio lights. He called it a vision, Justin said. A prophecy, not a metaphor, a warning. The host sat still, unsure of how to breathe anymore. Justin read aloud, "The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend. But he will carry the void." A wave of shock rolled through the audience. Murmurs, then silence again. He believed, Justin said, that the greatest threat to faith isn't rebellion. It's imitation. Someone who looks right, sounds right, but brings emptiness. Someone the world would follow, because he looks like light. The host's throat moved as he swallowed, but he said nothing. He said that imitation is deadlier than opposition, that the collapse wouldn't come through challenge, it would come through performance. Justin stared into the camera, and he said it was already happening. He placed the second sheet next to the first, then turned slightly in his chair. That's why I stopped touring, why I disappeared for a while. I wasn't having a breakdown. I was studying, researching, trying to understand what he meant. I read theology, apocryphal texts, everything. I spoke to monks, mystics, even survivors of clerical abuse. I listened, and slowly, I started to connect dots. The host finally found some footing. You're talking about big ideas here. Prophecy, power, theology. Maybe this is too much for... No. Justin's voice was firm, quiet but undeniable. This isn't a story. This is a warning. He leaned forward. And there's more. The studio seemed to lean in with him. After I opened the envelope, I started getting more letters. Anonymous, no names, all telling me the same thing. Stay quiet. One said I was being watched. Another said that breaking the silence would start something that couldn't be undone, that I would become a signal, that others would follow or fall. He took a slow breath. But the worst one came 2 months ago. Slipped under my hotel door. Just 5 words. He reached into his folder and pulled out a tiny note, held it up. It said, "The shadow is already here." A collective intake of breath filled the studio. I thought they were being poetic, dramatic, until I saw the photo. He pulled out a final item. A photograph, slightly faded, but clear. I didn't take this. I didn't even know it existed. It arrived in the mail, no return address. Just this. He turned the photo toward the host. Not the audience, not the camera. It's me and him. The night we met in the garden at the Vatican. The host squinted. Look, behind us. Between the trees. He pointed. There. The host's eyes widened slightly. There's someone. Justin nodded. A figure, hooded, standing still, watching. The host leaned back, his face drained of color. I thought maybe it was a guard, a mistake. But then, I received 3 more photos. Different years, different cities, always someone in the background, same hood, same stance. He slid them across the table, facing only the host. Whoever it is, they've been following me, watching, since that night. The host finally whispered, "Who is it?" Justin looked at him. I don't know. But the Pope warned me. In the dream. The host blinked. The dream? Justin nodded. After I opened the envelope, that night I had a dream. Or maybe something more. I was standing in a massive empty church. Dust in the air. No light. Just echoes. He paused. And at the altar, he was there. Pope Francis. Waiting. Not sick. Not tired. Calm. The host said nothing. He looked at me and said, "You thought you were only a singer, but I saw the man who carried silence with dignity." Justin turned to the camera one more time, and then he said, "You will see the shadow before you see the light." He placed the photo face down on the table. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't a movie. This is a message. The silence was absolute. "Something's coming," Justin said. "And it won't knock. It will walk in like it belongs." He stood slowly. "And we'll let it." He looked down at the rosary one. "Last time, unless we wake up first." The room felt different now. Not just quiet, but reverent, like a cathedral moments before a funeral. Justin remained standing, both hands braced on the table, his eyes on the photo that faced the host, but not the world. The night I opened the envelope, he said softly, "I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I stayed up just staring at the words, that prophecy, trying to make sense of it." He took a deep breath. "The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void." He repeated it, this time slower, like the words had grown heavier the more he spoke them. I kept asking myself, what does the void mean? Is it evil? Is it just emptiness? Or is it something worse, something that looks good but has no soul? He looked up at the audience. That's what scared me the most. Not a villain, not a devil, but someone who seemed like light and wasn't. He sat back down, his body folding into the chair like it had just remembered how exhausted it was. There's a part of the letter I didn't read earlier, he said, because it's hard to say out loud. Because once I do, it's not just his fear anymore, it's mine too. He opened the folded prophecy once more and traced his finger along the ink. He wrote, "The world's faith is not crumbling from truth. It's starving from illusion." A ripple moved through the crowd. Soft, subtle, but palpable. Justin's voice steadied. He believed that people aren't losing faith because of scandals or science or sin. They're losing it because they can't tell what's real anymore, because everything sacred is being imitated. And they're buying the copy, he pointed at the letter, not to emphasize it, but to protect it. That's why he said it wouldn't come from heresy. It would come from imitation. He leaned closer. Think about that. We keep looking for the enemy in chaos, in rebellion, in loud voices screaming from the edges. But what if the real danger is quiet, smiling, familiar? What if it wears robes or a suit or a cross, or even carries a mic? The host, visibly tense now, tried to interject. Justin, this is heavy. I mean, I know, Justin interrupted gently. But that's why I couldn't keep it to myself. He folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. After that night, I started searching. Not online, not on TV. Quietly, through people who don't tweet, through texts that were never digitized. He opened a small, worn notebook and flipped through pages covered in ink. Symbols, dates, single lines of scripture. There was a pattern, he said. Not just in the warnings I got, but in what the prophecy pointed to. He tapped one page. A phrase kept showing up, in different places, different languages, but always the same meaning. He looked the host in the eye. Sine nomine, the host frowned. What's that mean? Without name, Justin said. It's not a group. It's not an organization. It's a belief. A whisper shared by those who've seen too much inside the church and can't trust it anymore, but still believe in something greater than it. The audience stirred again. He continued. They live in shadows, not because they're hiding from truth, but because they're trying to protect it. They believe that what's coming won't be stopped by the institution, that it can't be, that it has to be faced by people who have nothing to lose and nothing to gain. The host looked stunned. And you think Pope Francis was one of them? Justin shook his head. No, he wasn't part of it, but he knew about them. And I think in some way, he hoped they were right, because he knew the church as it was, maybe as it still is, wouldn't survive what's coming. He placed the notebook gently on the table. That's why he reached out to someone like me. Someone like you? The host asked, puzzled. You mean a pop star? Justin shook his head slowly. No, someone unexpected, someone outside, someone not chosen by power, but by silence. He paused, then added quietly, because what's coming doesn't need a leader. It needs a witness. The host sat back, breathing shallow. And do you believe it? The prophecy? The figure? All of it? Justin nodded once. Not dramatically, not defiantly, just truthfully. I didn't at first. I thought it was poetry, panic. But the more I looked, the more I felt it wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. He picked up the rosary again, holding it in both hands. He said faith would evolve, that it must. But he feared it would be manipulated first, hijacked, hollowed out. His eyes scanned the room slowly. And I think that's already started. The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a reckoning, a shared breath held by everyone watching, unsure whether they were part of a story or standing on the edge of something real. Then Justin said, and the prophecy wasn't just about what's coming. It was about who will stand when it arrives. And he left the question unspoken. Would we? Justin ran his fingers over the edge of the notebook one more time before closing it with care, almost like a ritual. His gaze lingered on the envelope, then the rosary, then the audience. There's something strange that happens when you begin to know too much, he said. People stop talking to you, but paper starts arriving. He pulled a slim manila folder from the leather satchel beside his chair. At first, I thought it was random, maybe even spam. You get fan mail, weird stuff all the time when you're in the spotlight. But then the pattern emerged. He laid out a stack of envelopes. Plain, unmarked, no stamps, just creases and silence. They always came by hand. Left, in dressing rooms, hotel lobbies, once on the piano of an empty recording studio, always where no one should have had access. He opened the first one. No return address, just a single sentence, typed on old paper. He read aloud. If you speak, others will suffer. He looked up. At first, I thought it was a threat, a warning. But the next one came 2 weeks later. He opened another envelope, sliding out a card no bigger than a playing card. Do not open the door. Silence protects. Another note, another month. You are not alone, but you must act alone. Each time Justin read a new line, the audience seemed to pull in closer, like the very air was being vacuumed towards him. He placed the notes side by side. Different paper, different fonts, different languages. One even came in Latin. He looked up again. And that's when I started calling it what it really was. A network. The host was leaning so far forward, it looked like he might fall off his seat. A network of what? He asked, barely above a whisper. Justin paused. Witnesses, believers, survivors. He held up a final letter, this one written in elegant handwritten script. It said, "You carry something sacred. That is why they fear you. But do not confuse silence with safety. Sometimes, silence is just the only weapon left." He placed it down slowly. These people, they don't belong to a club. There's no membership, no headquarters. But they all share one thing. They've seen behind the curtain. He turned back to the host. They've seen what I've seen. The host glanced at the letters again. But who are they? Justin's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't know. Not all of them. But I've started finding traces. He reached again into the folder and pulled out a few photocopies of what looked like ancient Bible pages, annotated by hand, words circled in red ink, others underlined. Old Bibles, hidden in monastery libraries, marginal notes, cryptic symbols, some in Hebrew, some in Latin, some unreadable. He laid one flat on the table and pointed. See this? He said. A small, almost invisible marking. An I, drawn in ink, above 3 Latin words. Sine nomine vivid, the host furrowed his brow. Without name. Lives? Justin nodded. It doesn't mean a person. It means a presence, a belief, a vow. He paused. They're the ones who left the church, but never left God. The audience was now suspended, in stillness. Justin flipped to another photo. A drawing found on the back of an apocryphal text. A candle inside a cage. Beneath it, the phrase, "Light is a prisoner of the faithful." He turned to the audience, voice dropping to something confessional. They believe the institution has failed, that the message has been buried under robes, marble, and ritual, that the divine voice has been lost in echoes. He looked back at the host. They're not trying to destroy the church. They're trying to keep it alive. Outside of it. The host let out a shaky breath. So, why contact you? Justin stared at the floor for a moment, then said quietly, because of what I represent, not because of who I am, but because I've been watched, tested, silent. He traced a finger across the edge of the envelope again. And maybe because I was chosen by someone who knew the church was running out of time. He leaned forward. One of the letters said something that never left me. It read, The Vatican is no longer the only holy city. The map has changed, but the compass still points north. The host looked confused. What does that mean? Justin shrugged. I think it means truth is no longer housed in one place. It's scattered, carried by people, not titles. He sat back, folding, his hands in his lap. This network, they're everywhere and nowhere. They don't ask for attention. They send messages when it matters. And I think they've been waiting. The host narrowed his eyes. For what? Justin looked directly into the camera, holding the audience captive once more. For the shadow, he said it calmly, with conviction. For the thing the Pope feared. For the imitation. The void. He picked up the photo again. They believe. The prophecy is real. That it's not just metaphor. That someone or something is already here. That it's already smiling. Already shaking hands. Already speaking from pulpits, studios, platforms. His hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from responsibility. They believe the only way to defeat it is not with war, or exorcism, or politics, but with witnesses, with people who will carry the real thing, quietly, truthfully, fearlessly. He looked around the studio, eyes scanning strangers like they were fellow members of something unspoken. And maybe that's why. I was chosen. The host didn't respond. He couldn't, because nothing was staged anymore. This was real. Justin stared at the table for a long moment, as if everything laid out in front of him, rosary, letters, notes, symbols, had formed a silent constellation, a language without words, a message without volume. And then he said, I didn't sleep the night I opened the envelope, but the night after, I did. His voice changed. Soft. Slower. Weighted with something not quite grief, not quite wonder, something in between. And I had a dream. The host didn't speak. He didn't blink. No one did. Justin's eyes remained distant. I was in a church, but not one I'd ever seen before. Massive, empty, not abandoned exactly, just untouched, like no one had prayed there for centuries, but somehow the silence had kept it alive. He glanced up. There was no light, no candles, but I could see. Everything was cast in this strange, silvery tone, like moonlight filtered through water. He shifted in his seat, his hands folding together. I walked down the aisle. Dust rose with every step. I didn't hear footsteps, just this hum, like the silence itself was vibrating. He paused. And at the altar, he was there. The room seemed to exhale in a single breath. Pope Francis, but not sick, not tired. He looked younger, peaceful. His eyes, they were kind, but they carried something heavy. Not sadness, not fear, just knowledge. Justin leaned forward. He didn't say my name. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me like he'd been waiting. He took a long pause before continuing. Then he said, You thought you were only a singer, but I saw the man who carried silence with dignity. The host's jaw tensed. I wanted to speak, Justin said, but I couldn't. Not because I was afraid, but because it didn't feel like my place. He wasn't asking for answers. He was giving me something. He looked to the audience now, as if inviting them into the dream with him. He told me the church was drowning, not from sin, not from scandal, but from its own echo. He said, The voice of God has not vanished. It's just been buried beneath centuries of repetition. Justin's eyes began to shimmer. He said only someone who understands the value of silence can hear it again. A stillness gripped the room so deeply that even the camera operators didn't shift. And then he told me something I'll never forget. Justin's voice dropped. Your silence will be a door, he said. But you must decide if you'll let others walk through it, or keep it locked forever. The weight of the words pressed on the air like gravity. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat, shaking. My heart was racing, but I wasn't afraid. He looked at the host. I was certain. The host finally spoke. "You think it was real?" Justin nodded slowly. "I think it was more than a dream. I think it was placed, delivered." The host swallowed hard. "So, what did you do next?" Justin smiled faintly. "I stopped writing music. I started reading scripture, mysticism, early Christian texts, the Apocrypha, books people don't talk about." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. Not ornate, just used, covered in notes, symbols, question marks, drawings of eyes, candles, trees. I started documenting everything: nightmares, thoughts, coincidences, places where scripture and science overlapped. Sometimes I'd wake up with words in my head that I'd never heard before. He opened a page and read, "The lamp hides not from the dark, but from those who call it light and mean control." I didn't write that consciously. I don't even know what it means. He tapped the page. But it came, over and over again. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a voice at all. It was more like the silence behind everything was trying to speak. The host leaned forward. "And did it help? Did you find answers?" Justin stared down at the notebook. "No," he said, "but I started asking better questions." He ran his hand down the middle of the page. I started to see the connections, the forgotten prophets, the erased scriptures, the way silence was used not as peace, but as prison. The rosary glinted softly on the table, catching a stray camera light. I think Pope Francis saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Not a messenger, not a prophet, just someone willing to listen. He looked up again, and someone who wouldn't turn away when the silence got heavy. The host seemed frozen, and then Justin said, "But the dream didn't end there." The room leaned in. He walked to me, laid his hand on my shoulder and whispered, "What comes next will be worse. But don't speak for fear. Speak for those who have no voice left." Justin's expression shifted, part awe, part terror. And just before I woke up, he said something else, something I still don't fully understand. He closed the notebook, pressed his palm on top of it. "The shadow will not knock. It will already be inside, and it will speak with your voice before you know it's not yours." Silence. Real silence. And then quietly, he added, "I haven't sung publicly since that night." The host blinked. "Why not?" Justin looked him dead in the eye. "Because I'm still deciding whether my voice is mine anymore." The studio no longer felt like a studio. It felt like something sacred had cracked open, a seal on a silence too long buried. Justin sat still for a moment, the notebook beneath his palm, the weight of his words still echoing in the minds of every listener. Then he lifted his eyes and said, almost as if afraid to speak it aloud, "There's one more piece." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small envelope, different from the others. This one was thicker, heavier, sealed not with wax, but taped shut and wrapped in plain black string. It came 3 weeks ago. No return address. Just my name on the front, typed in lowercase letters. Not Justin Bieber. Just, you know. He paused. It was left in my hotel room. Not at the front desk. Not handed to me. On my bed. Even though I'd locked the room. Triple locked it. He opened the envelope slowly and slid out a photo, one already worn at the edges as if it had passed through many hands before reaching his. It's the Vatican. The night I met him in the garden. He showed the front of the photo to the host, not the camera. "That's me. That's Pope Francis. We were walking beneath the olive trees." The host looked at it, then squinted. "There's someone else." Justin nodded. Look, just behind the fountain, in the shadows, a figure, hooded, standing completely still. The host leaned in closer. I thought it was a statue, but it's not, Justin said. That same figure appears in 3 other photos I received over the last 5 years. Always different cities. Always different people taking them. Always the same man. He pulled out the rest. 3 more photos, each, one bearing the same anomaly. In London, in Rio, in Montreal. Different crowds, different years, but always, somewhere in the background, him. He pointed again. He's never clear. He's always distant. He's always watching. The host looked shaken now, his voice a whisper. How is that possible? Justin didn't answer it first. Then he said, I think it's because he's not a person in the way we think of people. I think he's the signal, a beat. Of what? Of the thing that's coming, Justin said. The void, the imitation. He laid the 4 photos side by side, forming a sequence of moments that no longer felt like coincidence. I didn't understand what the Pope meant at first, about the shadow, about seeing it before the light. But after the dream, after this, I think I do. He turned to the host, voice steady now. The figure doesn't just appear randomly, he appears before something breaks. A cathedral in Brazil burned a week after that photo. A priest in Montreal vanished days after the one there. And London. A theologian was found dead in the Thames. He picked up the Vatican photo again. This one was the first. The night he told me the secret. The host leaned back, visibly disturbed. You think this figure is real? Justin didn't hesitate. I know it is, but I don't think he's just a man. I think he's a presence, a reminder, a messenger of what's already in motion. He turned the photo toward the audience now, but only slightly, enough for them to glimpse the darkness at the edge of the frame. You remember what Pope Francis told me in the dream? He asked. The host nodded slowly. You will see the shadow before you see the light. Justin let that hang in the air. He said it's not a threat, it's a warning. Something's coming, and it won't be the church that faces it first. It'll be us. He swept a hand across the letters, the photos, the notebook. Because the church doesn't recognize it. It's too familiar. It looks too much like holiness. Too much like light. The host finally asked, So what do we do? Justin looked at him, then at the audience, then back at the camera. We wake up. He let the words linger. We stop confusing performance with purpose. We stop thinking the truth will always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just waits. He leaned forward, palms flat on the table. And when it comes, it won't look like evil. It'll look like comfort, like charm, like leadership. But it will be hollow. He looked down at the photo one last time. And it's already here. The host was speechless. The audience frozen. And then Justin stood, not with drama, not with flair, just with finality. He looked around, his eyes heavier than when he first walked onto that stage. Faith isn't gone, he said. It's just been stolen, dressed up in gold and noise and mirrors. But the real thing, the light, is still out there, still inside people who remember what it felt like before the echo. He walked toward the edge of the set, but stopped just short of the curtain and turned back. If you see the shadow, he said softly, don't look away. Then he disappeared behind the curtain, and the room stayed silent, not because it didn't know what to say, but because for the first time it understood the weight of silence. The curtain swayed gently behind him as Justin disappeared, but the weight of his words did not leave. They lingered, not in the way most stories do, with a satisfying resolution or a round of applause, but like something unfinished, something left behind in the still air. The host remained seated, staring at the table. His hands rested inches from the rosary, the photos, the sealed notes, the fragments of a secret no one had expected to hear that night. His practiced smile was gone, his usual control gone. What remained was a man, visibly shaken, whispering a question no one dared answer aloud. What just happened? The audience didn't move. Because they felt it too. That this wasn't performance, this wasn't marketing, this wasn't a documentary or a clever stunt. This was something far older, far deeper. A warning, a confession, a passing of a burden from one unlikely messenger to all of us. In homes around the world, as the broadcast was replayed, paused, shared. Viewers didn't comment on Justin's appearance or the host's awkward silences. They didn't talk about the envelope or the rosary like props on a stage. They asked themselves, have I seen the shadow? Would I even know if I had? That night, faith stopped being something abstract. It stopped being a word reserved for sermons and Sunday. It became real, terrifyingly real. And in the quiet aftermath, something even more unexpected happened. People began to whisper, not just online, not just in comment sections, in churches, in backrooms of seminaries, in corners of monasteries, long abandoned. They whispered the phrase written in fading ink in the margins of Bibles, sine nomine vivid, without name. It lives. Those who had buried their doubts beneath ritual began to revisit them. Those who had once believed but left suddenly returned, not to buildings, but to questions. And those who had always stayed silent began to wonder if maybe it was time to speak. Justin didn't return to the stage. He didn't tweet. He didn't clarify. He didn't give interviews. He vanished into the silence once more. But silence after a night like that no longer meant peace. It meant a countdown. Because if what he said was true, if the figure was real, if the shadow was already here, then this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One that would unfold not in headlines, but in hearts, not through institutions, but through individuals, through people who have nothing to gain and everything to lose. Just like him. And now, maybe just like you. Because the next step doesn't belong to Justin. It belongs to us. We've heard the warning. The question now is, what will we do with it? And this is only the beginning. Stay with us, because what comes next will shake even the silence.